So we've got our interim producers. So if things get a little rocky, somebody might get fired tonight. It was right after the Bears won the Super Bowl one year. That was 85.
Mm-hmm.
You dropped a rap album.
A hippie to the hip hop, you don't stop.
Because a lot of people are like, who started rap? Was it Sugar Hill Gang? Was it, Grandmaster Flash? Who started it? And
Melly
I'm
Mel,
like,
yeah.
why isn't Jake West in this conversation?
It was kind of like going the Marky Mark route. Like he was like, hey, he did his thing, but now he's not known as a rapper.
Right.
Now he's an actor, movie star. So like I travel the world doing stand up. So I would start doing it in church.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of counted that as a mic. Like you were like, they would say, hey, does anyone want to have a prayer of the people?
Mm-hmm.
And then you would stand up there with an index card and start working the crowd, working the choir. And I remember hearing like, some people were like, hey, it's sacrilegious. I was like, it's smart, is what it is. It's smart. So,
right. A lot of those people, a lot of people were kind of TO'd because I would do such a long prayer, because I was getting, I would do like 30, 45 minutes.
And it was like, what's the deal with shopping carts? And people were like, what's this have to do with the Bible?
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, you know what? It has everything to do with the Bible. Because number one, it's about food and it's about relatable things. And number two, who cares? He's killing.
You had a spot at the Cellar.
Mm-hmm.
John Stewart went up right before you.
Yeah.
And you completely annihilate. He did well, but you annihilated.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, we hung out with him and we were telling him this theory. And he was like, this makes so much sense.
There was somebody's funeral where you were like, I'm going to work it in. And it was like,
luckily that whole week, I mean, I was actually under police investigation because I had such a good set at a wake. They were like, how did he know that this person was going to die? So like, there's no way he planned this material, but I was so on my riff game back then that
half of your set, it was like you were doing crowd work with the corpse, and people didn't understand that you knew that they were dead. Like you weren't, but it was like a bit. You were like, this guy gets it. Every half of your jokes, like this guy gets what I'm talking about, and you're like, go out swinging like this guy, and the next thing you know, it was like people were actually again laughing, giggling, and it was like, and some people were like, hey, that's inappropriate, and I was like, when is laughter inappropriate? Laughter it's always a good time.
Right.
Laugh. It's always good.
Back in those days, I was like, no pun intended. We all did it. And this is kind of a comedy standard nowadays. But in those days, you and I both would dig ourselves a hole. No pun intended.
No. Yeah.
We would dig ourselves a hole and then try to work our way out, because we're like, we would go 40, 45 minutes of just literally trying to bomb. It was hard to do because people recognized us. And then if we could bomb, and then we'd spend 5-10 minutes of some of the hardest hitting comedy that we could conjure. And it would totally, the next day, the Washington Post would be raving about, Lancey Joe, JakeWestComedy.com did the wake of some so-and-so. And then everybody's on our team at that point, but we're like, yeah, but there was 45 minutes there where everybody was like, do they still have it? And we're like, right into our trap.
I remember standing in front of the coffin, and the servant, the sermon, the rector giving the sermon was like, okay, look, I'm going to give you 50 minutes. And I was like, that's a little tight for me, but I'll make it work. And and I was like, okay, so for the first 47, all I did was say, I'm glad she's dead. Like, honestly, I'm glad, like, good. Like, she shouldn't be here. We're all better. Like, everyone is literally better off. Like, dude, tell me I'm not. And then people were just like, confused, and there was a lot of angry faces, and it got more progressively angrier as it went on.
Yeah.
And I was asked to leave multiple occasions.
Yeah.
And then they brought in 3 security guards who were standing by the entrances, who were like inching forward, and I was like, right on time. Welcome, welcome, flies to honey, like flies to honey. Come on in, suckers. And the next 3 minutes, I was like, this guy's wife is a fat ass. This guy, boom. And they're like, we're back.
Yes.
We're back on track. Boom, boom. The next 3 minutes, and the guy was like, you know what? You brought it home in 50. How did you do that? I was like, it's the job. It's the job.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that was
the only person not laughing was the corpse.
She was the only one, and honestly, I was almost like maybe, but no, it wasn't. Yeah. I was like hoping, no, but I was like no.
I started seeing the ends of her mouth. It's like staring, because I was like, surely
the vibration is something, because there's like brain activity. They say brain activity still happens, so I was like maybe, but no, it didn't. Sadly, but yeah, that was and to this day, I don't even know who she was, but I was like, you know what? I'm just going to riff on why I'm glad she's dead. And
but back in those days, 30,000 or whatever was that was decent money.
I remember jokingly telling the dead woman's husband, who was also older, I was like, I'll see you in 2 weeks. And and I was like, book me up. And he's like, I'm banking on it. And I was like, oh man, I should open because now I got to check my schedule. Like I didn't even, it's like, because there was like that funeral circuit, especially in the spring and summer. It was really, really hot time for people to die back in those days. But I was like, if everybody was like, oh man, when he dies, hopefully you can do, and I was like, yeah, hopefully. But the schedule gets so full so fast. Like the avails, it's not there sometimes.
Yeah, there was once where I did that, and the person said, well, you've just promised me you'll do mine. And then I was like, this was during, I was doing crowd work, and they tried to get me with a verbal contract in crowd work, which we all know, because of that Supreme Court thing, that doesn't count. If you're doing crowd work, that's considered an art form. It's not a legally binding contract.
The Pickering decision. It was like, Joe Pickering, he was like, he would like verbally, and then he tried to get out of it. And so the Pickering decision, I think it was 92. And they were like, hey, you know what? If it's verbal, that's not enough. Yeah. And so, which is good. It was great, because comics were known for saying things on stage, and it's like people are like, no, you said. And it's like, that's not.
Yeah. Nowadays we take it for granted, but back in the, I guess, 80s, the mid 80s, it was kind of a gray area. And if you wanted to make, because back in those days, like doing a verbal contract on stage would kill. Like it was money in the bank. Because just all the premises and stuff were for whatever, how comedy is, like for some reason that was hot to do a verbal contract on stage. And in the Joe Pickering case, I actually thought that he was in the wrong, because he signed something on stage, and he can't do that.
But right, I remember that. But the decision was that it was on stage, but because it was on stage, it was part of a performance.
Exactly.
So performance-based signing, which I didn't know this, because I'm not. You've done some law,
right?
But I haven't done as much legal work as you have. But I didn't realize that was a loophole. So now you can if you sign the deed to a house, or you agree to a mortgage, and you're on stage, you can say, I was a comedian, I was just kidding. And it's kind of it was a JK loophole, where you can just like JK loophole yourself out of there.
Right.
And
what a lot of people would do is we would see at open mics, you would see a lot of realtors were so famous for this.
So many in the 90s. Yeah.
They would do that on stage just to kind of test the waters.
The economy was so good.
Yeah.
The economy was so good, and realtors were like, you know what? Who's not buying a house? Who's not buying 3 houses? So it's like, boom, comedians. comedians, these guys are making 30 grand a night. Let's get in on this. Let's get some thing. Let's
Right.
Boca Raton house, Salt Lake City house, boom, boom, boom. And it became a thing of like,
And
hey,
so what they did was, is if you signed the contract and you were in the audience, you were not part of any act.
right.
But
You were not part of
it,
that.
if it turned out not to be good for the realtor, then they would cancel it because they would say it was part of their show. And that's when they were like, that's when it came back, the case, the Pickering case part 2, which was in the later 90s. And I remember Tupac got involved in that, and like there was some back and forth with Suge Knight and the whole West Coast.
It was a shame because Pickering was actually, he was a really good comedian, and he but he would bring, God bless him, he would bring a stack of contracts on stage.
Yeah, I remember that, and that's I still laugh to this day.
Yeah, it was great. It was a great bit. It was like he was like marrying people. He was like you can't marry. He's like he bought so many houses. He signed he would buy, Joe Pickering would buy like 8 cars a night. He would like, and then everybody was like, hey, you owe us literally like $900,000 next week, because he would put himself in debt, like with a car, just like his monthly payments. And he was like, hey, come on, guys. And that was kind of what that got that whole thing. So I was glad to see him win that case, because it became this whole thing of like, come on, it's clearly he didn't legally marry 8 women in one night. Like that's not, I don't even know if that's possible. So even in Utah. So I was like, he got himself out of it. But it was
himself. He wasn't just marrying people, like he wasn't just officiating weddings.
No,
which he was doing.
He wasn't just officiating.
He wasn't just doing that.
He wasn't just officiating weddings for other people. He was also officiating his own weddings.
Yes,
which he's like, I remember he was like, do I take this woman? Yes, I do. And he's like, do I, Joe Pickering, take this woman? And then he had to be like, yes, I do. Will I present the ring? Yes, I will. Do I have? And he was like, yes. Who presents this woman? He would bring himself. Who do I present this woman? I bring. It was a whole thing, but it was like, that was great. It was a great bit. And then people were like, well, now you owe me this much money. You owe me a house. You're my, that was a whole.
Yeah, incredible. And I remember one time
he was ahead of his time. He was ahead of his time.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And a lot of stuff that we joke about these days wouldn't have even came about if it wasn't the Supreme Court.
No. The Supreme Court has saved so many comedians.
Yeah, for sure. Yes. Yeah. And that's why I'm always rooting for it to make it to the Supreme Court. Because if
I'm like, oh, we're Money in the Bank. Yeah.
Those old dudes have some
they get it.
Sense of humor.
Like